All right. Without further ado, because the lady of the hour, Katherine Homuth, is asked to catch a flight, we're gonna we're gonna jump ahead and welcome Katherine to the stage. She needs no introduction, but Katherine Homuth, the founder of SheerTex.
Awesome. Excited to be here. Oh yeah, you have
okay.
fun photos.
I have fun photos. First off, thank you so much for being here. On behalf of all the builders out here, you have been such an amazing inspiration to all of us. Building openly, publicly, sharing your experience and inspiring all of us. So another round of applause for Katherine. Please.
Oh, thank
you. So Dan actually touched a little bit on your early founder journey. And I thought before going into SheerTex, maybe we should talk about your first companies.
So I have been following startups and startup events since basically when I was in middle school and high school. I remember my first startup conferences. I was in high school and I didn't even know the word entrepreneurship. I just knew that there were these people doing kind of cool things and I wanted to somehow be associated with it. And I would have all of these like little businesses that I would try to create that were like really silly. It was like an event planning business. And I think I tried to like sell handbags modeled after like what my sister's friend brought home from Italy. And all of these different things I didn't even really think of as businesses. I was just trying to find a path to create value or do something interesting. And it became very clear that the people I admired happened to be entrepreneurs. And, you know, those demo camps that Dan was talking about, you know, I was at those demo camps back in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, like very, very early in this startup community here in Toronto. And I didn't really even know what startup I wanted to do, or, you know, everything felt like a false start. And, you know, some of you here might not really know exactly whether you want to get into startups, whether you want to work for them, whether you want to start something yourself. And I was very much in that position. And the thing that I ended up doing was just deciding to go work for a startup, because I figured if I don't know what I want to do, I just want to get as close as possible. Alex was mentioning you had Stuart Lombard from Ecobee come. So that was my first job out of school, was working in marketing at Ecobee. This would have been back in 2010, I think, 2010, 2011. So this was before Nest launched, before really anyone else was doing connected thermostats. And it threw me into the world of manufacturing. It threw me very much even closer than I'd been, you know, going to these events, into the world of starting things. And that's what kind of started my journey deeper into the tech community. But at the same time, I had the opportunity to meet Toby, who founded Shopify, probably back in 2008. So they were only 2 years into working on Shopify. And he came and spoke at one of the events I planned that was something like this. And obviously, you know, loved what they were doing. I ended up getting into Shopify themes. So, you know, similar, I think someone earlier was saying they were doing Shopify theme building. I was doing that as well. And that's what led to my first real venture that I ended up leaving Ecobee to start, which was called ShopLocket. And I went through Extreme Startups, which was an incubator here back in sort of the early 2010s. Ended up selling that business to a company called PCH International, which is one of the largest manufacturers of electronics in the world, based mostly out of Shenzhen, but it's an Irish business. And they manufacture for Apple. They were the first manufacturer for Beats by Dre. And so that really threw me even deeper into this world of high-tech manufacturing. And after that, I started doing a little bit of angel investing. ShopLocket was really made possible through a $10,000 investment from a friend who made that investment after I'd gotten rejected from Y Combinator. And that led to ShopLocket really, you know, being able to start. And so I started doing a little angel investing, realized that very often, this was back in 2015, 2016, I was the only woman on the cap table. So I started an organization called Female Funders. And we were really about trying to educate women about how angel investing works, how you can network your way into deals, and really create a path for women to start angel investing as well. I ended up selling that to Highline Beta, which is a venture capital firm based here out of Canada, and then was trying to figure out what is it that I want to do next. Had a couple false starts in there. I ended up becoming the CEO of a business, invested some money into it, and got fired the day after my check landed. That was a little dramatic. Felt very sorry for myself, but kept trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do next. And honestly, pantyhose is probably the last possible thing I ever thought that I would get into. But what really struck me at the time was, I'd been in this world of high tech manufacturing, and I'd seen people work on what to me seemed like ridiculous non-problems, the connected chair, the connected water bottle, the this, the that. And it seemed like we had all these incredibly smart people tackling things that weren't problem, while very basic problems seemed to still exist in the world. And pantyhose was just one of those things. I was like, okay, like I'm pulling on this pair of tights, it's ripping after one or two wears. Like, how is this not solved? How do we have space travel? How do we have self-driving cars? But something as ridiculous as a pair of tights not ripping on the first wear doesn't exist. And I just went down this rabbit hole, really me, Alibaba, Google, Amazon, trying to figure out, like, why does this not exist? Like, we must have types of materials that could fix this. And as I went deeper and deeper into the problem, it became clear that basically all the materials that were out there, just when you made them small enough for pantyhose, they were not strong enough. And you actually had to look outside the world of textiles. And for me, I went like really far outside that world to ballistics. And that's where we found ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. I say we, but we was me. It was very lonely. But we found ultra high molecular weight polyethylene, ordered the most expensive spool of fiber you could ever imagine, and turned it into the ugliest pair of cheesecloth tights you could imagine. And I looked at these cheesecloth tights and I said, it's magic. This is it. It's perfect. And that started the journey of what ultimately ended up being a long journey to building SheerTex.
That's truly an ugly baby, right?
It's so beautiful.
I love it. So I want to know so much more about the founding story of SheerTex. But before I do that, I do want to use my cool photo that I got courtesy
my amazing haircut. I really, if you're bleaching your hair, stop bleaching your hair. My hair wouldn't grow. It was awful. Oh my God. Yeah. It's like traumatized me for life. But yes.
But shout out to Beta Kid and Siri, who have this amazing photo to haunt you from 2014. So before we go into SheerTex, this is when you sold your first company, Shop Locket.
Yeah, it looks like that is at Extreme Labs.
Yep.
So yeah, that would be just as we were getting into the incubator. It's Andrew Lewis, my co-founder. But yeah, we were probably just trying to close our first round. We ended up raising about $1 million in financing for that business, which was in and of itself, it felt impossible at the time. Looking back, it was like a storied fundraise. Like I was very, very lucky, but no, it felt like a horribly hard problem at the time. And we really, went through quite a journey to find product market fit on that business. Eventually finding product market fit for us, we thought it was going to be people that had blogs and wanted to kind of sell from their blogs. It ended up being, we had really sophisticated customers who were using Kickstarter and Indiegogo and launching very, very technologically advanced products, but not ready for a full website with multiple products. So Shopify at the time was a great option, but it was really, really built around selling, 100 things or 10 things. One product looked a little bit ridiculous on a Shopify store at the time. So those were the people that ended up using us, and we were the first Stripe partner. So I think it was literally Shopify and us that launched with Stripe Connect. So you could either set up your store with Shopify or you could use us if you wanted to use Stripe. And that's how we ended up getting our first forays into hardware, which led to the acquisition.
But you get acquired, and you immediately go into building another business.
Yeah, I think there's this thing when you sell a company that no one really thinks is going to happen, at least to them, and not something that most people talk about, but it's actually on your first acquisition. I think it's like this deep depression that occurs afterwards. You go from putting everything into something, being, very much as Dan was saying, like incredibly stressed out. The highs are highs, the lows are low. And you finally make it to the other side. And like whether you made it out financially well or financially not well, I don't even think that matters to the depression that happens at the end of this. But even if you were successful, usually what happens is you start to think, I will never be able to do that again. And am I worth anything? Was that luck? How did that happen? Like now I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. Do I have any purpose in life? And you go into this like spiral. And even if it doesn't work, you go into a similar spiral. So there's not really a great outcome on the other side. But for me, the solution to the like deep anxiety and questioning my self-worth was to throw myself into something else immediately to try to prove to myself that I could do something again. Because you always also remember the things that went wrong in that business. And it's like you overcorrect for that in the next business that you do. And for me, we had users, we had gross marketplace value, but in terms of our own revenue as a business, we were not generating that much revenue. We were always going for like gross marketplace value and getting revenue for our customers, but our percentage was always really small. So I really, really, really wanted to optimize for revenue in the next things I was doing. I wouldn't say that female funders was necessarily in that was kind of a different bent to what I was trying to do, but it was certainly a complex that I was trying to solve for on SheerText. Was like, we need to generate revenue because revenue is something that I've never generated before, and I need to prove myself that I can generate revenue. And like, I'm sure on the next thing that I do, there'll be some other complex from this one that will be like, I need to be profitable from day one. I don't know, it's going to be like something that I massively overcorrect for in the next business. So that's probably, why I jumped into it right away.
I love it. Every time it gets better. And so going into SheerText, because I know a lot of people were telling me before when we were giving me some tips on questions they wanted to know, and we have a lot of e-commerce builders here. I think one thing that you've done incredibly well when it comes to SheerText is making a highly technical product accessible and understandable to the consumer. And I see often with builders, we develop amazing recipes, and in food, we develop amazing recipes, and we love the ingredients that we use, but it's really hard to translate to a consumer, why that's good for you. And I feel like that's a bit the story of your fabric. I tried saying the word of that fabric. Can you say it again?
Ultra high molecular weight polyethylene.
Yeah, so that's not going to work. So how do we make a highly technical product accessible to consumer? How did you do that?
Yeah, so in the very early days, we also had a little bit of anxiety around actually talking about what the innovation was because we were worried that other people would try to do it. Turns out it's so freaking hard. I actually would have felt sorry for someone if they had tried. And now, because we're actually making the polymer ourselves and we've driven our cost basically as low as anyone possibly could, it's actually cheaper to work with us than to compete against us. So we're less weary about talking about all the technical aspects of the product. I mean, also there's the patent side, but you can't really rely on that fully. So in the early days, the most remarkable thing about our product is literally if you can show, no matter how hard you try, you can't rip it. And this is the thing that most people don't understand when you're just talking about it being strong. But you could give this to the strongest person you know, and no matter how hard they go at it in the morning, when they're trying to put it on, they are not going to rip it. And what we were trying to figure out is how do you actually translate that to someone? And in the beginning, we did a lot of really crazy tests. So I hung in climbing equipment from the ceiling with our tights. And then I did the same thing with regular tights and fell. And we would show the contrast of how that worked. We would do, I don't know, basically anything crazy. I remember I was pulled around with a tractor through a pair of tights once. So that's how the testing started. And it was a game of experimenting really with how could we visually communicate this. And I honestly think that it took years, probably 4 years, until we got to a visual language that I was like, yes, this is what I've been attempting to photograph or get on video for so many years, and finally we got it. So I think specifically it was 2022. So we started this in 2017, and in 2022, the team nailed it. There's lots of stuff that we did before that, But finally, there came a point in 2022, and it's like, we will not photograph anything unless it is showing the strength of the product. And like that became like this hard and fast rule where we went from, there was a lot of lifestyle imagery, or there were a lot of like different types of shots, and it was just like, absolutely not. Like, you will literally not shoot anything but something that shows that the product is strong. But then it worked on the consumer side, but we had a few other challenges because we almost did so well at like ramming it into people's heads with lots of money spent on Meta, what we were doing from a photo and video perspective, that we kind of became this like Instagram pantyhose brand, which is fine. People understood what we did, and we've sold millions and millions of pairs of tights because of it. But people didn't understand the broader story. So, there was the connect. Connie was speaking about the connection to community. I wouldn't say that ShareText has a particularly good connection to our community. We have sold the solution to a problem, and people have bought the solution to a problem. But this goes to like, why did I start publishing things publicly a few months ago? Well, not even a few months, it feels like a few months, literally weeks ago. And it was because I read an article, and it was a New York Times review where they compared us to basically this other competitor that has been copying our marketing playbook for years. We bought their products before. The products are just regular tights. You can put your finger. It's like, it's crap. Like, it's just the same shit everyone else has. And the New York Times did this glowing review of them and this like takedown of us, and basically saying, oh, well, they use this polyethylene thing. It sounds like it's like liquid plastic, definitely not, stronger than nylon, probably the same. And I was like, okay, I honestly don't care whether you like the tights or not. Like, I could give you all the scientific reasons why this isn't correct. But what bothered me about it was that they didn't understand how we were different to this other brand that's literally buying crap made, they probably don't even know, throwing a logo and basically spinning a story. And we were seen basically in the same light as this. And I was like, how have I spent this much money and this much time attempting to get people to understand what we do, and I have so terribly missed the mark? Like, maybe what we do doesn't matter. Maybe our product doesn't matter. Maybe this was all just a freaking waste of time. And I pretty much put that post on Instagram being like, this is what the New York Times wrote. Does what I do matter, or like, is this all a load of crap? And people responded to that post more than they'd responded to pretty much anything that I'd posted for years and years and years. And it was all about their great stories of using the product, or what they love about it, or why they need it in their life, or, keep going, or whatever it might be. But more encouragement and more nice things that I'd heard in the entirety of trying to start this company. And you go to, a lot of cult brands, community brands, you'll go onto their Instagram and you'll see hundreds of positive comments of, it doesn't matter what they do. Like, they took a new photo and it's like, oh my God, this is the best thing in the world. You go to ours and it's like literally no interaction. Like, there's a few things. We have 300,000 followers, but like, compared to that, there's like seriously not that much interaction. And all of this sent me like really thinking about, I know it's like so cliche, but back to like Simon Sinek's Start With Why, and like really looked at it, and I was like, we totally have solved the problem. It's a great solution. It should replace the entire category, but we're selling a thing, and people have like pretty much no emotional connection to anything about that thing. And we have not let people in on the why. And the why for us is that we really believe that manufacturing needs a complete rethink. That if you're going to be able to create things that are innovative, or if you're going to be able to do manufacturing in the Western world again, you have to do it differently. And for us, that's thinking it, from the things that we think are impossible, like a pair of unbreakable tights. How do we think outside of what people are doing today? And then if we want to do manufacturing here, what has to change? For us, that meant we had to automate. That meant we had to build all of our own software. We had to build all of our own vertical integration. So we make everything from powder to product. And why? And so we can get every single cost out of it so that someone can't make it cheaper in China. So we want to make it cheaper than China. And that is our goal here. And the reason is we want to make it for the long term here. And we want the investment in the infrastructure, the investment in the smart factories to be done here. We want to build that platform that new materials will be built on. And like, that's why this New York Times article saying that we were the freaking same, like, was so aggravating to me because we had put so much time and so much effort into being different in how we built. We do everything under one roof in Montreal. We have over 300 employees that work directly for us. We've spent over 60 million investing in an extrusion line where we make all of our own fibers so that we can make this polymer at scale. And no one freaking understood. So a few weeks ago, I started ranting not just to ChatGPT, but to the internet as well. And really trying to say, if you do care, you being the world, like, this is the actual story. This is what we're doing. And it's cost us a hell of a lot to do it. And without people that don't just sit there and like watch and buy the product, but like actually actively care and help, like, we can't complete the journey. This is not something that with just like, you know, a little bit of people liking the product for its function and like buying it when it's convenient, that we're going to be able to make it over this hurdle. Like, we need people to care in the way that, what was it? Like, I don't even know the one that didn't start with Y, but Netflix won. Who lost? TiVo. TiVo lost. I don't want to be TiVo. So I need people to care.
Wow. And it's clear that you care, and we need more builders like you who are willing to think big, who are willing to build Canadian brands and amazing manufacturing facilities like this one. In 2020, you bought an old hosiery factory in Montreal.
Yeah, in 2019, the perfect time to buy a plant 4 months before it gets shut down by COVID. We bought the biggest hosiery plant in Canada. And unlike pretty much every tech and commerce business, it was certainly not benefited by COVID. You don't want to sell tights for going out when people aren't getting out of their pajamas. So we went through some rough years, but we grew. Like, we ended up growing quite significantly year over year. But for us, the goal was really to grow the volume so we could get the price down. The first pairs of tights we made cost over $100 to make. In that was about $50 worth of fiber. If you go to November of last year, we finally got it down to about $12 to make a pair of tights. And then December overnight, when we turned on our extrusion lines, the one that we've been basically working on for years, it went down to $7.50 effectively overnight when we started in-housing our own product, our own fiber. And we have a path now as we scale up that fiber production to get to $2.50 within the next 18 months. And for us, that's always been the goal. We want to get to parity with nylon. We don't want there to be basically any choice between us and a pair of nylon tights. And I always like to remind people that tights are the most innovative category. You know, Dan mentioned the 0 to 1, pick that small market, win it and go. Nylon started in tights, started in pantyhose, and then is probably in pretty much every single thing that everyone is wearing today. Then spandex started in tights and is pretty much in every single thing that every single person is wearing today. And I very much believe that ultra high milk rate polyethylene will start in tights, and 10, 20 years from now, we'll look around a room like this and it'll be in pretty much everything that we wear, making it lighter weight, making it recyclable, making it longer lasting. And we're the brand that's going to make that possible. So I really look at ourselves like more like a DuPont that is bringing these new materials into the mass consumer market. And because of that, we've had to build a lot of technology, everything from software to mechanical design to the extrusion lines, the material science. And, you know, it's all this kind of iceberg under a pantyhose business.
Wow. It's amazing. There's a lot of builders here who are looking to build a global brand. And I always remember this story when you did your pop-up. If you have a minute to Google it, what the team did is they took over a bodega in New York and like completely transformed it into a pop-up. And I remember the pop-up had like blocks of lineups. So you've obviously built an iconic brand outside of Canada and built something global. What are some of the best practices for the builders here of like building something that can scale?
Yeah. So I think that if I were to go back to the earliest things that we did that worked, it was that we weren't really getting the scale that we wanted to see. And I remember, very much to Dan's point about do something every week. We decided one month that we had really big sales objectives. We were basically starting at zero, and we were going to do something different every single day that had a shot at working. And we were learning everything for the first time, so all of the basics were super novel for us. So there was, we went to CES and we did a press room, and we had all the press come by, and that actually worked. We got a whole bunch of stories, and that got a little bit of sales. Then another thing, and this is all like in a very short span of time, that month we also tried Facebook advertising for the first time. It actually completely failed, like really didn't work that first time we tried it. Mind you, we tried it again pretty much every month after that until it did work. But that was one of the things we attempted. We did our first email blasts, and oh my gosh, we got some sales. We did our first sale, and that worked. We launched new product for pre-sale, and that worked. We probably did a million other things that didn't work at the same time. We also launched a Kickstarter for a new product, and that also got a little bit. But these were done in incredibly short succession. This was not like, we're going to plan to do this in a week. This was, we woke up, we had an idea, we did it. And it worked or it didn't work, and we went on to the next thing. And there's something I posted about this a few weeks ago, but one of my favorite concepts for startups is this idea of surface area for luck. And what it basically means is when you get lucky, sometimes it's because you actually like got lucky and you just picked it right. But most of the time it's because you tried 100 different things and one of them worked, and then it looks like you got lucky. And that's very much the case when like startup founders look like, oh, it was luck. Oftentimes they were actually working incredibly hard on a million failed things when something happened that made them find luck. So there's a partner at Y Combinator called Dalton Caldwell, and he has a little video that he wrote about this, basically with examples from Y Combinator of the luckiest founders and what they did during YC, which was basically move fast. The faster you move, the luckier you get, because the more that you do. And then as you start scaling your business, how do you find the people that you bring into your business to also be people that move fast so that they can also scale the luck of the business? And I don't think anything could be truer to the journey that we've had at SheerTex. There has honestly felt like there's been no luck. Like it's been so hard at every single step of the way, and nothing came easy. But we had to, like, in order to get to the next step, literally do 100 things to get to that next step. So eventually it starts looking like you climb the stairs, but actually, you literally took 100 steps backwards and 101 steps forward, and it was just painful to move every single inch. So I think that my advice is move quickly. Like you don't have that much time, and you can move quite quickly. And I think people always underestimate it. I see this with our teams. Like that pop-up shop was probably launched like 2 weeks after we had the idea. Wow. And that would have been slow for us. So we do everything at this like really, really hyper speed. And it comes from this like sense that most things aren't going to work. Wow. And we're going to have to try a lot of things.
Wow. And how do you, as a leader, get your team to execute on that pace and keep them motivated? I mean, it seems like so much pressure on Katherine.
Yeah, like I think that you certainly find a lot of people that don't like it. I think that we have gone through lots of eras of people working at the company. eras where we were better at describing what the job was going to look like, eras where I was a better communicator or a worse communicator during the time. Like when things are changing that fast, you're moving that fast, it can feel like whiplash to a team that doesn't have all the context. And I know that I gave whiplash to our team for many, many years in there, probably. And it very much, this idea of surface area for luck can come off to a team like you don't know what you're doing and there is no strategy. And when you turn around and say, well, the strategy is to do lots of different things really, really quickly, people don't find that particularly comforting. So I think it's finding people that get it. And then also, and I think this has been really important for us, as soon as certain parts of the organization can be standardized and not be as chaotic, make them standardized and not chaotic. So we've tried to keep the chaos to the areas of the organization where if you standardize it right now, you're standardizing a broken thing. Like, don't do that. So we've tried to, as quickly as possible, get parts of the organization to a point that they're stable so that the chaos is contained. That said, in the early days, nothing was contained. Like it was just like everything was broken. And so I'd say that where the company is today, there's a lot of parts of the organization that are incredibly well run by great managers that provide the team, a fair amount of clarity, but also are quite adaptable and can move quickly. Whereas, there's other parts where that's not quite the case and we still have to be really, really fast in how we move.
So I'm going to ask one last question and then we'll take some from the crowd. But one of the things you've been very open about right now on your Substack and on LinkedIn is your fundraising journey. Mm-hmm. And right now you're a bit of at a crossroads. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
I think though the one thing that people misunderstand about the fact that I'm being incredibly transparent about the fact that we're currently actively raising money is that this is just, I'm telling you about it right now, but like we could have had this conversation 4 months ago. We could have had this conversation 6 months ago. We could have had this conversation 18 months ago. And like, I also would have been in the middle of an active fundraise. Like it's literally just been my journey throughout all of this. We've raised at this point in time about 200 million in equity. About 150 million of that came in a series of 4 rounds of financing, including our seed. Then we raised 53 million in a convertible debt round of 75 million that we're raising in that round. We've also raised about 50 million in debt through a variety of different partners. And with what we're doing, what we found is that it's so hard to wrap a thesis around, that generally it's been hard to find like really big funds or big partners that are like, this matches my thesis perfectly. I was always looking for the tights business with, mechanical and materials, building and manufacturing in Canada. This sounds perfect. Like never happens. So what we usually find is people that are like, this is cool. I kind of want to dip my toe into this. I'll be part of something. So we've had a lot of what like the industry would call a party round, where we have lots of people take part. So when I send a shareholder update, it's going to like 200 people. And because of that, our fundraising is very much like always happening, always on. We're always into the next round or the next thing. And I think I've just kind of like come to terms with that. It's become like my steady state of being. I always like dream that one day, like I'll have someone come and be like, I totally see it. This is amazing. Here, we're going to do this round and it's going to be perfect and we'll go into the sunset. But I'm also realistic that I'm also okay just doing it the way that we have to do it to get the business going. This one, I think I'm more confident telling the world about, because the business is working so much better than it's ever worked before. And like, it's so freaking close to being like truly game changing, like with the fiber production now happening, the unit economics happening. At this point, just for 2025, we have more confirmed orders from B2B partners than units we shipped all of last year. Like it's working. Like, usually you ask me how I feel about it this like 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years ago, I'd be like, it's fucking shit show. I have no freaking clue. But like right now, like I feel good about the business. So I'm comfortable telling people that we're raising money, not soliciting investment. That's illegal. But the thing that's ironic is now that I'm talking about it, people are like, oh, it must be really bad right now. So you're talking about it. I'm like, no, I'm talking about it because it's actually really good right now. And I'm confident enough to talk about it. But like that definitely doesn't get heard. So yeah, I'm talking about it because I finally ripped the Band-Aid off and I want to not be TiVo. I want people to believe more deeply in what we do and understand why we exist. And maybe my dream investors out there somewhere.
Yes. I love that. And it's true what they say, always be fundraising. You're so right. Like I think like
please don't always be fundraising. It's freaking awful.
It sucks, but we are.
Do what you have to do.
Do what you got to do, but
fundraising.
It's true that you jump out of a fundraising cycle. You have like a few minutes to build, and you're back on it. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate all the honest conversation. We're going to pass it to the crowd, and Sharif, you have someone over there.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, guys. I'm Siri Grell. I'm the CEO of BetaKit. I'm not here asking you a question on the record, but I'm asking you because the three of us actually have talked a lot about storytelling and how the stories that we tell ourselves and that are told about us really impact our lives and our companies and the sector. And so I want to ask you a question about a story we heard earlier tonight and a story that's told a lot to the sector vis-a-vis fundraising. Do you believe the story that if an investor doesn't invest in you, something is wrong with you? And if not, what is your diagnosis of what you'd like to see change in the investment landscape right now?
So I will say that I have a very strong internal locus of control. So I do give myself a very hard time about everything and blame myself for everything. But I would say that when I, for example, look out into the world and say, it's incredibly hard for me to raise money for this thing. It's incredibly hard for me to get people to understand. Like, obviously, 4 weeks ago, I decided I was doing something wrong. So I started telling the internet on LinkedIn because I was like, people don't get it. I've not communicated this correctly, and I am going to attempt to tell the world. That was me attempting to course correct for what I believed I had done wrong, which was not tell the story in a way that people understood the value of what we were doing. That has not particularly worked. I'll be quite transparent. I think it's interesting content for startup people. And I'm happy to provide interesting content, and I'll continue to provide you interesting content. That was the reason why people aren't maybe connecting with the product or the investment. I don't think that's necessarily solved my problems. So now it's kind of like, okay, from a business perspective, is there something that we could do that could make this opportunity scream louder, like from the business fundamentals? It's honestly hard because we're working in atoms, and like I'm trying to move, and it's expensive and it's hard. And I understand that's why people don't want to invest, because it's expensive and it's hard. So I'm like trying to like fight physics and like make it happen faster and cheaper so that people will see. And so yeah, it's like, but it feels like that's been our journey from the beginning. It's just like, how do we grin and bear it harder so that people will see it? And do I wish it were easier? Like 1,000%. Like I wish that it were the sexy thing to invest in like physical manufacturing, because like software is vaporware. Who wants to invest in that shit? Like I wish that were the sentiment. And they're like, yeah, I want a manufacturing business. That's not the sentiment. No one says that. So I'm in this world where the thing that I'm doing is not the sexy, cool thing. And there's a million business reasons why that's the case. There's a million societal reasons why that's the case. I do hope I can do a little bit to change the narrative, because I think it's a scary place for an economy to be, where we basically outsource everything that we make. And I don't understand why people don't see that. And then I have a one-to-one conversation with someone. They're like, totally, I see that. Our economy is fucked, but I'm still going to invest in the app. And it's like, okay, so our checkbooks are not agreeing with what we know as humans because we're just trying to make money and the opportunity is there. So how do we make the money opportunity be where intellectually we know our checkbooks should go? And like, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Sorry, that's a very long-winded answer.
Do you think that the technology ecosystem is well established for companies like SheerText, or are there things that we could do to better support?
Okay, companies like ShareText, I like, honestly, like, we don't make stuff here. Like, it's a really, really, really hard problem when we're basically getting rid of our ability to make things constantly. In the time that I started this business, like, there was maybe 4 textile companies in Montreal when I started. There's none. Like, we are literally all that is left. So make things, like, we are not making things. And there's maybe a few examples, and then there's certainly some industries, I think we had a great example, skincare still exists here, but I bet it's a lot smaller this year than it was last year. And I bet every single one that's in that business is trying to figure out how the hell they stay in business. And my belief, and I think there's a really interesting concept that I've realized that I align very strongly with, is this idea of techno-industrialism. And it's the idea that if you use technology rather than labor as your primary input or input cost, then you can actually create globally competitive products. So this means manufacturing based on automation, on technology, rather than on cheap labor. And if you can design your manufacturing based on high levels of automation, you can actually produce it cheaper here than it can be produced overseas. And you totally change the equation, but that requires capital, and that requires patience. It's something that Western investors are completely unfamiliar with in the last couple of decades because of outsourcing. You go to Asia and this is understood, this is known, this is what you set up. And we're getting leapfrogged here. And we need to start investing in these new ways of manufacturing. And if you get like really sci-fi, like the world I think that we're going towards is a world where products only cost the amount of energy it costs to make that product, because the thing is so heavily automated that the only cost is energy. And you're like, well, what about raw materials? What about all these things? Well, imagine if it were closed loop. Imagine if you could take an end product and put it back into the beginning of the system. Now you don't even have raw material cost. So that's how I imagine SheerText. And that's what we've basically built. We've built the ability to make the fiber. We've also built the technology to deconstruct the product on the other side, so we have a completely closed loop system that can produce for the cost of energy. And then we're in basically the lowest cost, only renewably powered, region, almost entirely renewably powered, Quebec, which means when we get to the cost of energy, we're in the right place to do it. So I know that that's like super sci-fi, but I honestly think that that's how we have to rethink manufacturing if we're going to bring industry back.
I mean, I think we're sitting with, I feel like this is innovation. This is someone explaining to us how it's going to be and the vision for it. And I just want to applaud you for thinking, years ahead. And I'm sorry that the system hasn't caught up, but it will. I know it will, because you will make it happen. I know it.
My magical investors out there.
You will. Well, last question, maybe.
I think we have time for one more. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Thank you. Let me stand up here. Sorry.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm the founder and CEO of Figura, and we are carving.
Hi.
Hey, Marie. I told you I was coming for you. We're carving a whole new market segment within the femtech industry by seamlessly blending it into the bra industry, and particularly for women with implant-based breasts through ergonomic patent-pending solutions. We're in the middle of a fundraise, and I wanted your opinion, especially in early days of fundraising with SheerText, because you carved a brand new segment. What was your strategy when investors would pose questions to you like, why hasn't anybody else done this? Especially for such a massive industry that you entered that's been around since Jesus was a cowboy. Why has no one else done this before you?
So I don't think that I ever gave a good enough answer to that question that someone invested based on my answer to that question. So just to be clear, in the very early days when I had my cheesecloth prototype, I remember, for example, I was sitting down with Joe Mimran, who founded Joe Fresh and Club Monaco, and he looked at this prototype and like, you've never seen more disgust on someone's face. Like it was awful. And he even like talks about this moment about like how horrible this prototype was. And I, of course, like leave this. I'm like, oh, did he like it? I don't know. And he ends up deciding to invest. He invested a couple times throughout the company's journey, but he invested in that. And it was only, maybe a year later when he was like willing to be honest about what he thought at the time that he was like, honestly, I had no idea if you were going to do it, but I wanted to be the person that like, if you did figure it out, I didn't want to have said no. Like it was the FOMO of it, the idea that I could figure it out, and he would have been the guy that said no to Unbreakable Pantyhose. And so I don't think I convinced him. It was more that I showed that the market opportunity, I know it's not a direct parallel, but that there was something that you could miss out on. So if you're saying like, this is totally the thing, everyone believes it, and you leave enough doubt in the person who's saying like, oh, what if she's right? Like, do I want to miss out if she's right? And like, that's sometimes what gets people to invest in those early stages. And then I would say that, when it came to the point that we were actually making the product, all that mattered was sales. Like literally nothing else mattered. Like they would say, why do this instead of licensing, or who's going to actually want this? And it's like sales. And like, that was the only answer that would work. Now the types of questions that I get are like, how big could the market get, and like how much control do you have of those sales? Like how do you expand through these B2B partners, or how do you expand globally, or like all of these questions. Like the question just changes. And I think at any point in time, all you're trying to do to raise money is give someone enough doubt in their doubts that they're like, I don't want to miss out. And that human psychology, I think, runs pretty much all of investing.
Amazing. Should we take one more?
I think we should take one more.
Okay. You
I
have
missed
to go.
the flight. It's
You
okay.
missed the
We'll stay.
flight?
It's
Oh my
fine.
God.
It's fine.
Okay,
I'm
going.
here all night now.
That's awesome. Siri's buying us dinner.
So being an entrepreneur who cares about sustainability, I think that your product is amazing. I mean, I guess you're using those, your pair of, how do you call it, tights for how long? How long? I mean, what is the actually the buying process for your products?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of different studies on this. I'd say that the average customer gets between 20 and 50 wears compared to an average of 3 to 4 wears on a typical pair of tights. So roughly 10 times more wears is what we generally say. We have customers that have gotten well over 100 wears. We have customers that are wearing the same pair that they bought back in 2019. So it really depends. What I tend to tell people is think of it as going from something literally disposable, like you don't know if it's going to make it through the day, to something more like socks and underwear, where you might eventually get a hole in your socks. You might eventually want to replace your underwear, but you're not leaving the house and being like, will I have the same socks at the end of the day? And like, that's what we're changing about tights.
Love it.
I can attest to having 50 wears, and now I'm like embarrassed. I'm gonna go home and change them. All right, are we done? Okay, we're getting kicked out. Thank you so much,
Thank you, guys.
Katherine. So appreciate you.